Hi there, welcome to Rock Roll Yourself podcast. My name's Joanne. I'm going to be joined by Ross, and we're going to be talking about the albums that came out in July. We can do things for like a couple of weeks until everything will probably shut down again. So
usually I do all my notes for reviews at the weekend, but the last 3 weekends in a row, I've just been out every night just drinking, so I've not really had the chance as much.
Drink the pain away.
Yep.
But yeah, that kind of leads nicely into the first album that's going to be a lot about drinking. I should have said at the start, we're going to do one album each that's going to be from earlier in the year, just because there's really not that many albums coming out in July. I mean, it's usually like that anyway, but see, because there's no festivals or anything, it's really noticeable. So I've picked one, and obviously Ross has picked one, and this is mine from way back in January. It's from this band called Dune Rats, as in D-U-N-E, not J-U-N-E. This came out in at the end of January, and it's from the Australian group. I would say they're a punk band, but they're a pub rock band, which is its own thing in Australia. It came to my attention because I really liked the Violent Soho album that was out last year, and there's like a massive punk scene in Australia that's just like party vibes and just totally Australian. This band is, if you don't like Australian accents, then you're probably not going to dig this, because it's very, very Australian.
Oh yeah.
Because I obviously sent it to Ross when we were doing this, and
yeah, I mean, I've only had a chance to listen to it once, and I think with the sort of intro thing, phone call thing, I thought it was going to be like a sort of total comedy album. Even looking at the cover and some of the tracks that are on there, just like If My Bong Could Talk and stuff like that. It's surprisingly not too comedy, but it's got a good sense of humour about it. And it's easy listening. It's
like the total Australian way of just not taking yourself seriously at all, but with the ramped up to 100, these guys know how to party. I've looked up some live footage, because obviously we've not had the chance to see them and probably won't for the next while, but they look absolutely mental live. They play, I think they're quite big in Australia now, so they play main stages on festivals, and they have the pure t-shirt cannons and things like that. They're wild. But yeah, so their kind of sound is pop punk, I guess, but a really snotty version of it. It's not like your super polished pop punk. It's like I say, they're party animals, and their music kind of replicates that. It's like Sum 41 kind of, but Australian version of Sum 41 that are they don't take themselves seriously, but it's totally infectious stuff. Like you say, the spoken intro at the start kind of indicates what the album's going to be. So you've got some guy called Bobby D saying how he basically just wants to party, basically, and then that kind of followed up with the song Bobby D, obviously about him. That kind of sounds like, do you remember that song from the band Lit? I can't remember what it's called, but the one with the bowling alley.
Yeah, something enemy. Yeah.
My worst enemy or something. My one enemy or whatever. It sounds like that. The guitars sound like that.
That was it. Yeah. I remember thinking that actually, but for some reason my head went to L7, so I think I was just mixing up my band.
Yeah, pretty similar. It's just the basically. But yeah, it's a pure massive chorus. If you were to play that at a festival, then it's going to go off. Anybody that knows me knows I don't drink, right? But see if this song just makes you want to smash cans on your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Airborne do. It's an Australian thing, clearly. But they've got other kind of energetic songs. You've got Crazy, which is kind of grungy, which is obviously my cup of tea. Got Bad Habits, and I think I've got another few written down here. Stupid Is As Stupid Does, and obviously the one you said, If My Bong Could Talk, which those have massive choruses that you're just never going to get out your head for at least a few weeks. When I listen to this properly, there's a few songs on here that just don't leave my head. Apparently this is obviously their third album, and they've kind of went a bit more polished. I've listened to bits of the last two, and they were kind of more raw, kind of more punky. But this one's a wee bit less raucous. There's a few songs on it that are gentler, a bit looser. They've got the producer that they had for this album was actually from Violent Soho, so it's as if that kind of influences went into songs like Rubber Arm, No Plan, Rock Bottom, also Patience and The Skids, which are kind of almost acoustic-y songs. They're still fun, but they're kind of more low tempo, like actually kind of like maybe contemplating how the party lifestyle could have like downsides to it, but they're still like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like they still don't care. It's still pretty careless. But I can see that probably in Australia, probably in the scene that they're from, you did maybe get some, oh, you've sold out or whatever. Like you're not as wild as you used to be, but still good to me. Like overall, I really like this album. Like it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of missing at the moment. It's just a fun album you can just stick on and not really think about too much.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, kind of pop punk, but not just the bad parts of pop punk where it's just like, oh, this is so sweet and sugary and horrible. But in saying that, the song Stupid As Stupid Does kind of border on that. They've got a vocalist on it, a guest vocalist called Kay Flay. I don't know who this person is, right? But I looked her up, and she's apparently like a rapper, and now she kind of does like pop punk type stuff. I don't know, but her voice comes in on it, and it just, why? Why is she here? It just makes it sound weird. Like it's very, very like sweet. It just doesn't go with what their kind of thing it is. I don't know. But
it's like early 2000s pop punk.
Yeah, very much that. Like Paramore, but even more sugary.
Yeah.
It's like I thought that died out. But yeah, like it's an odd one. I don't know, like how they just phoned her up from the other side of the world and went, "Oh, you're going to be on our song?" And she went, "Yeah, sure." Just odd. But yeah, as long as they don't have any like loads of songs that are like that on the next album, I'm not too worried. But it just kind of maybe indicates that might happen. I hope not. But yeah, like as we were saying earlier, you've got, they've got very much influenced by AC/DC, and you see that in the last song, which is called "Mountains Come and Go, but Aussie Pub Rock lives on (brackets forever," which is basically just that. It's just them singing that, and then with a bit of Thundershock playing, because of course it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, one of the most fun albums I've heard in ages. Like, I could just stick this on whenever and kind of just forget that, the world is just terrible.
Although, I'm thinking that, like, you said this was released in January, didn't you?
Yeah.
So wouldn't that have been at, like, the same time as, like, the Australian bushfire thing was happening? So that's a bit of a weird kind of contrast.
Yeah, I think it would have been just after. It's a summer album, though, so I suppose they released it in their summer, which makes sense, but releasing it in January over here is a bit odd, because it's just, it does seem designed for, like, to be released now. So I suppose it's appropriate to be covering it now. Dune Rats and Hurry Up and Wait, which I've been really enjoying. And then we've gone to Traveller, which is from earlier this year as well. Yeah. Second album from the Canadian heavy metal band. I would definitely say they're a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Which obviously follows on from Starbreaker, I believe it is, that you wrote about last year, I think.
I don't think I did. I don't even know if I actually listened to that album, to be honest.
I think I'm getting it mixed up with, was it Haunt? The other band?
It was Haunt, yeah. I think that was back in January, actually.
Yeah, I think, to me, I mixed those up in my head, because I think I listened back to a bit of the first Traveller album, and I just thought it was the Haunt one for some reason. But yeah, I can see why you wanted to cover this one, because it's total Iron Maiden worship, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm determined to go through like one of these reviews, or like just like a month of reviewing without mentioning Maiden at least once, but it never seems to actually happen. I have to mention them at least once. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, I mean, this band it would be very difficult for you not to mention Iron Maiden.
Yeah, because I think I even said to you, like, the first time I listened to it back in April, it's essentially what I would want, like, the early 90s Maiden to sound like, because obviously with, like, No Prayer for the Dying, they wanted to go back to the kind of raw, sort of edgy, punky sound, and it didn't work out well, because it got, like, a lot of cheesiness. But if it did it like this, it would have been amazing, I think.
I would just be controversial and say that I think that is a No Prayer for the Dying is actually probably within my top 4 Iron Maiden albums, which makes you like go, yeah, I told you that before.
What the hell?
Because I like cheese.
It's like 4 good tracks.
It's all fun. I like fun.
Good. Oh, well. Teach his own.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, so they are pretty much a heavy metal band. Like you said, influenced by like the sort of Maiden era, like the new wave of British heavy metal. There's some thrash influence kind of strewn about as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, like the bits that I heard of the album, like I didn't listen to it all, but I listened to like a couple of songs. It's like a bit of Judas Priest and the kind of vocal delivery, like kind of more gritty than like Bruce Dickinson. Yeah,
the vocal delivery, it's got like that great thing. I think Bruce was actually trying to do the same thing at the time in the 90s, and obviously didn't really work out. But Yeah, but the vocalist, I don't know if I'm going to say his name right, but Jean-Pierre Aboud, because they're obviously French-Canadian.
Yeah.
But yeah, he can sort of do the sort of lower sort of growls, and he can also go do that sort of air raid siren whenever he needs to as well, and he kind of uses it sparingly, so it always sounds pretty good. Even like the first track's probably, might be the best track on the album, it's Shaded Mirror, and it's basically, it lets you know right away it's going to sound like Iron Maiden, because it almost sounds exactly like Be Quick or Be Dead from Feet of the Dark, because it's just got that sort of fast riff and the drums just going crazy, and that air raid siren straight away, and it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely sounding like Maiden.
Yeah, a lot of like galloping lead guitar and bass.
Yeah.
Just it's like, oh yeah, we like Maiden just a little bit.
The guitar solos as well, though. The guitar solos in this are just amazing. Love them on this. Like, there's so many. There's a few different tracks, but a few of them just are like, you know that when a guitar solo just hits you and you just have to kind of like sit there and appreciate it for like a little bit.
Yeah. I think I listened to maybe the first 2 songs on the album, or 3, but I've like listened to bits and pieces of it. Like, this is not really my cup of tea. Like, I don't really, like, I like Maiden, but I don't, I'm not as big a fan as you are, so like, this isn't so much for me, but I could see that comparing this to the previous album, it's like the production is really good on this album.
Yeah, it's like it's trying to sound classic without going a bit too far. Like, I kind of get what you mean by Haunt now. I mean, I still like Haunt, but I can see how you may think the production would go down a little bit just because they're trying to sound a bit too classic. But here it sounds modern, while also sort of being influenced by that classic style.
Yeah, because like the first album that I went back to with this, just to compare it, was like very, see, like when they do like a kind of, they have like a lo-fi, like they're trying to like do the 80s sound, but it just sounds like it's been recorded in a garage or something.
Yeah.
Even like in the 80s, Maiden were massive, so trying to do that on a kind of 80s sounding album makes no sense to me. So like them stepping it up for this one, just, you know, it makes the song sound bigger, because they probably can afford it more now, but it's quite impressive that they went from just releasing an album last year to stepping it up like that much this time around.
Yeah, it's like they know what sound they're going for and they're going to go for it, so 2 albums in, that's pretty good.
Did you ever listen to the first one?
I think I might have when the album first came out. I don't remember like enjoying it as much as this, so I must have just kind of thrown it to the side a little bit, but I probably should have listened to it before I did this, but I was too busy just trying to get the nose for this.
I would assume it's probably a step up if you really liked this one, but you weren't so keen on the first one.
Yeah, just like the band just trying to find their sound, essentially.
Yeah, what's the best parts of the album for you?
For most of it, to be honest. I mean, there's not a bad album. There's not a bad song on here. They've even got one, like, it's got to be some sort of like a shout out. It's just called Diary of a Maiden. Like, surely that's got to be like aimed towards Maiden. Surely. And the fact, and like most of it's like a 6-minute track, but it's got like so many like different tempo changes. There's like a sort of melodic section that actually sounds like Remember Tomorrow by Maiden or Strange World. It's got the big giant Maiden gallop towards the end as well. Massive solos. The intro sounds like it's from Somewhere in Time. It's just, it essentially sounds like a love letter to Iron Maiden, not just being an amazing song as well.
Yeah. Do you think there's any other influences other than like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest that you can hear on it? Just if, you know, MD's listening, that's like, I'm not really keen on Iron Maiden. Is there anything else on it?
I mean, most of it does go that. The only track that really sort of veers sort of differently is a track called Deep Space. It's the sort of the second last track on the album, but it does kind of come out of nowhere because it goes like almost just full sort of speed thrash metal throughout the whole thing, and it's just more of a like sort of Motorhead influence or early Metallica, so that's probably the one that might turn a few heads. Basically
with this album, if you like Iron Maiden, you'll probably really like this. If not, I mean, you could give it a listen, but like,
it's worth a go. They don't do anything different, like that's going to like reinvent the wheel. It's kind of like Power Trip, like they're not really doing anything new, but what they're doing just sounds great. Yeah. I mean, Power Trip's better, obviously. Traveller might be listening, I don't want them to be angry at me.
Different kind, it's fine. But yeah, like even, like I say, I'm not so much into like this kind of modern take on like heavy metal basically, but they do seem like one of the better bands of that type of music.
Yeah, they know what, they're just kind of doing their own thing and making their own sound. So
yeah. But yeah, so if you like Iron Maiden, I would check this out. The next one, if you don't like Iron Maiden, you'll maybe get on with this one a bit better. It's one that we both listened to, and I'm pretty sure we both like, but we'll talk about that in a minute. It's the first album, I keep forgetting it's the first album from Phoxjaw, Royal Swan, obviously third album, but they've had like a ton of singles and EPs in the last 3 to 4 years. So it's quite weird that this is only the first album, considering they've put so much music out already. But I've not listened to them until now. I've heard of them for a long time, but it's only been when this album came out that I actually gave them a listen, and I'm pretty glad that I did, to be honest. It's a It's a pretty crazy album, really. Where do we even start with this? The first song is called Charging Pale Horses, and I mean, it's just an intro track, basically, but it's already very, like, so dramatic. It's got, like, these, like, chorus, like, choral singing and bells that just kind of build and build and build, and then you've got Trophies in the Attic, which, like, just instantly like it because it sounds like early Biffy Clyro, which... like that's what I've been missing from Biffy Clyro a little bit. Comes in sounding like Infinity, like land, and it's mathy guitar and jagged screaming, dense guitars. It's just like wild sounding. Like you don't really expect it because of how kind of subtly the last track is, and then that just comes in like pure like like
yeah, it's like alt rock trying to go for like a sort of black metal edge almost.
Yeah, it's like when I got described this band to me, they kind of describe themselves as a grunge band, but honestly, I can't hear it in like pretty much all of this album. It's way more kind of interesting and unique than just like, oh, we're just an alt rock like grunge band, because like, I mean you do Biffy Clyro is probably one of the main influences on this album, but there is so much different influences that it's almost hard to even pin them down. You've got Triple AAA, which was one of the singles. It kind of sounds like, again, Biffy Clyro, but this time kind of puzzle era Biffy, with kind of mixed with Queens of the Stone Age, like that kind of deserty kind of thing that like Josh Homme does. That's good.
I think there was one track on here. This is only one that I actually listened to once, but I did like it. There was one track on here, I can't remember which one it is. It might be Infinite Badness, but it really reminded me of Folding Stars by Biffy. I can't remember which song it was, but I'm sure there's one that kind of starts off like that. It just really reminded me of it.
Like it could literally be any of these. You could pretty much listen to any song and take a different influence from, just depending on what your taste in rock music is. Like Half House, I think that's the one after Triple AAA, which is like, again, that kind of Queens of the Stone Age type thing, but it's like a big single. It's like, I think it's probably the most accessible moment on the album, but it's going to be huge when they play it live. But then, like, immediately after that, you get the song called You Can't Drink a Unicorn's Blood, which I think they're very like animal welfare type of thing, like that they're very much on that kind of thing, but
I thought that was a Harry Potter reference, I won't lie.
I mean, it could be, like, it wouldn't surprise me how mental this band is, but, like, it sounds like somebody pointed it out, and I went, like, I hadn't even thought of that before, but the vocals on it sound like, you know how Darren from System of a Down, the kind of, like his voice, it sounds like that, and you're like, right, so you went from Biffy Clyro and Queens of Stone Age and Arctic Monkeys to System of a Down, like, within the space of a song, and it makes sense. It's mental. They're
like the code orange of alt rock.
Yeah, like, I put this album on, like, I think I told you, I put it on just when it came out, the night it came out, and I was just like, what is this? Like, it was just crazy, just jumping about, like, pretty much other than the Code Orange, not like any other album I've heard of this year. I've got written down, you said about Infinite Badness, that's a kind of slower song. It's, kind of like eerie, atmospheric notes, like, but it's really doomy as well. So it could be that one, but it literally could be any of these. We've got Teething, which is again very kind of soft and slow, but then it has like these synths that come in that sound like the Twilight Sad, like 80s kind of gothic synths, but then it's like dancey drum beats. Just mental, but it works. I love bands that can do that. I don't know if you've listened to them, but Black Peaks, it's kind of like that. Oh no, you saw Black Peaks with me at Download, didn't you?
I downloaded, yeah, that's right.
Because Phoxjaw were supposed to support Black Peaks when they were supposed to be playing, so that just makes total sense. You've got An Owl is a Cat with Wings. Again, song titles are crazy, but that one again, System of a Down, again, it's like carnival, like a rum-bum-bum kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who even does that? Who even sits down and goes, we're going to write a song like that? Bats for Bleeding, yet again, it's all animals. Just noticed that. Bats for Bleeding's got kind of like jazzy rhythm, which it's like cabaret.
Yeah.
It's just like, when I was sitting writing the notes for this, I was like, this album is even more mental than I thought it originally was. It's like the instruments just spiral out of control and kind of makes you feel a bit dizzy, but in a good way. But then I'm pretty sure you'll like this song, the last one on the album, that's obviously Swan. It's probably the album's like focal point because it's a pure sprawling 7-minute track that's mental.
Yeah,
It
I
just
do
has,
remember liking that one a lot.
yeah, it's very heavy. It's like probably the heaviest that the album gets, but it just takes every genre, every kind of weird genre that it does, and just puts it into one massive song. Yeah, I mean, again, it's an album that I think anybody that listens to it, you wouldn't be able to just get off the bat, because like you say, you've only listened to it once, but I think if you listen to it at least 2, 3, 4 times, you'll get more and more out of it each time.
Yeah, find something new.
Yeah, it's the kind of really ambitious rock band that you don't really see that much of. I meant to say at the start they're a band from Bristol, which again makes total sense considering so many good bands are from Bristol. I don't know what it is in the water there, but they're just mad experimental bands and they're really good. I just hope that when this all ends, or at least when things get a bit better, that we can hopefully see them live and see how these songs sound like live, because they are still a small band, but they're coming out with songs like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be like up there. That's, album of the year, top 10, top 20 lists for me anyway. I don't know if you probably feel quite so strong, but I know you liked it when you listened to it the first time.
Yeah, I liked it more than another one we'll have coming up soon.
Yeah. Which is also one that might be in my top 20, but we'll get into that. But first we're going to go to another one of your picks, or, well, I say it was your pick, but I just kind of suggested it to you because it seems like your cup of tea. It's a band called I never know how to say this name, Ensiferum.
I've just become Ensiferum.
Ensiferum.
An American tinge to it.
Yeah, I mean, they're from Finland, so
yeah,
they're a folk metal band from Finland, so I mean, just go with it. It's the 8th album from them, and it's called Thalassic, which is apparently ancient Greek for, it means relating to the seas.
I wrote that down because I was going to say smart, but that's cool.
Sorry. Apparently it relates to the album's themes, but again, I haven't really listened to this because again, it's not really what I tend to listen to. I don't mind a bit of folk metal here and there, but it's not really what I go for, so I'll probably just hand it over to you, see what you think about it.
Yeah, even on my first listen, I thought it was like, this is alright, but it's not really for me. But I've actually listened to it like 4 or 5 times since then. I'm started to get like more every time I listen to it, because I've looked everywhere and they just describe themselves as Finnish melodic folk metal, but there's some definite like power metal here.
Yeah, sorry, I've just got written down like folk, power, Viking, melodic death metal. They've got a bit of everything, at least in their back catalogue, apparently.
Yeah, I was going to say there's like influences, but this band's been around since like 2000, 2001, so if anything, bands are probably like taken from them. But yeah, there's like so many like similar other bands. Like there's times where it sounds like it could be like Ailstorm, it could be Amon Amarth, it could be, well, even Dragon Force. There's a bunch of times I've went like, this sounds like Dragon Force, but not like in a bad way. It does have like those cheesy moments, kind of like Powerwolf and that, but it's kind of to be expected with these kind of albums.
Yeah, you're never going to get a serious album like this. Like if you're into like really serious kind of metal, you're not going to probably gel with this. But at the same time, it doesn't seem to be quite as cheesy as the likes of like, Sabaton or Ailstorm. At least modern Ailstorm. Like, it's not like a pirate metal album.
That's what I thought it was going to be at first, because the first track is, the first like proper track after the instrumental is Rum Women Victory, which does sound like an Ailstorm song. And it does kind of go that sort of power metal way, but it never feels like it's trying to be too comedic or anything like that.
Yeah.
Plus the vocals on it are great, because again, it's kind of like when we're talking about the Traveller, that they can go from like a sort of low, almost like metalcore kind of growl, and then have those sort of more air raid siren kind of vocals whenever they need to as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like, some kind of power metal, it's very clean vocals, and you can hear everything that they're saying. The very little that I listen to this, it's like a kind of gruff, like more kind of almost like, like the Amon Amarth kind of like growling vocals for quite a bit of it, so you don't actually really hear what they're saying.
Yeah, without going too far.
So it probably is a bit more serious than what it might be, but I don't know. I never really gave it much time.
I was even looking at like I was trying to get more details on like the band members, and it seems like every person in the band has more than like one thing to do, which is actually kind of mental. Like 3 of them do clean vocals, 2 of them do harsh vocals, there's 2 guitarists, there's drums, percussion, keyboards, there's just like everything, which is 5 band members. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, do you think it sounds like that? Do you think it sounds like there's loads going on when it's actually happening, or does it not sound like that? Does it just sound like a regular band?
No, it never sounds overwhelming. It's kind of like the same way Slipknot has 9 members, but listening to them, you would imagine they only have like 4 or 5. You know what I mean? With the rest coming back in.
Yeah, it's maybe that they don't do it all the time, like they maybe kind of interchange, and folk metal's weird.
I did love like the intro though. There's the intro track's called Seafarer's Dream, which is like a 3-minute just instrumental track, but it genuinely sounds like it could be like the introduction to like a big sort of fantasy movie. Like I was even getting like Braveheart tinges out of it, so that was pretty impressive. And then it just jumps into that Women Victory song. But basically, most of the tracks do have like they kind of mix up like sort of melodic sections. Like Defense of the Sample actually starts sounding like a western, which is kind of like weird considering what the rest of the album's like. But then they just throw in like baritones in the background, and it just starts sounding like a Disney musical song. It's mental, but I kind of love it.
Yeah, that's like the kind of the thing that people don't like about power metal and folk metal is how kind of, I wouldn't say it is cheesy, like, but how kind of a certain type of cheesy it is.
Yeah, it almost sounds like that parody of heavy metal, like Spinal Taps. I think some people get rubbed the wrong way with it, but if you're having fun, you're having fun, which I kind of was with this. Like, genuinely, I was trying to find like a bad thing to say, but there's only like one track that I thought was alright, and even then it was still pretty catchy because they know how to do like a big sort of catchy chorus and a big sort of dance along tune, so well done to them.
Kind of comparing it to other bands that you like of the same type, where do you think that kind of this sits within them?
I don't really know, because it actually sounds closer to like the sort of more comedy ones like Ailstorm or Glory Hammer, but never goes over that kind of edge. Especially the Glory Hammer, like the vocals are sort of similar and the sound's kind of similar in a lot of places.
So it's like comedy metal, but without the comedy. Basically.
Essentially, not to make it sound like Dune.
Yeah, like musically it sounds quite similar to those comedy bands, but not, with those lyrics.
Plus you get like your big power ballad as well. There's one called like One with the Sea, which is basically just like the like sort of slower, more. It sounds like what's the song? Where the Werewolves Have Gone by Powerwolf. It's kind of like that. Yeah. It doesn't go too far into sort of power ballad sort of territory, but it works well.
Is it really a power ballad dedicated to the sea? That's what it sounds like?
I think it. I remember thinking about this because I was listening to the lyrics, and I think it's talking about like dying and hoping that the world goes to peace, but it's kind of weird.
It's just like One with the Sea. It just sounds like a very like
exactly
mad metal imagery there. But yeah.
But yeah, essentially, if you want some like power metal sea shanties, this is probably the album to listen to.
I meant to say it earlier, but I think I had this band on my iPod like right at the start of getting into like metal music. I don't know if they're still there, but like when you're getting into, or you're trying to like listen to folk metal, and it's like, oh, these seem to be some of the biggest, like the biggest guys in the kind of scene, but you don't really hear much about them now, which is kind of odd.
First I'd heard of them when you mentioned them to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe just a European thing. Like they're maybe huge in Europe, but over here it's like, nah, we don't like that.
Yeah, it probably gets over well at whacking or something like that.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, that's Ensiferum. Again, don't know if we're saying that right. Thalassic on Metal Blade Records if you want to check that out. Next one is another metal album, but again, a different type of metal that we both actually quite like. What is it with bands with difficult names? It's like Gaerea.
Don't say it like that. It sounds like diarrhea.
No, it does, but like how Gaerea?
I've been pronouncing it. Gaerea. I think it's Gaerea, maybe.
Gaerea or Gaerea or something. Wait, it's Gaerea. And the album's called Limbo. It is their second album. They're from Portugal and they do black metal, I would say is the most simple way of describing them, but it's definitely more than just kind of, your lo-fi black metal from the 90s sort of thing.
Yeah, it's more of a blackened death metal sound, like kind of like Behemoth, but without as much of like the sort of satanic edge.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I first heard of this band and I put on the album, I was like, I just instantly thought Behemoth, like particularly latter day Behemoth. Maybe not the last album Behemoth, but the Satanist, that kind of era.
Close at the sort of heaviness of that, yeah.
Yeah. It's got like kind of like low end of the like death metal, but with the kind of black metal blast beats and things like that, just the kind of oppressive sound of black metal, I suppose.
I did look at like the lyrics because I was like, is this kind of like satanic? But it seems to be more kind of, I don't want to say reality based because Satanism could be reality based, I guess, but it's more just sort of to do with like the sort of human mind and things like that. So it kind of goes into that kind of dark place. Kind of like that album I had. What was the one I had like a few months ago? Like Obsidian Tongue. It was kind of like that.
Oh yeah. It's like it's quite rare actually when you think about it for like black, even death metal bands to have songs about or albums about the real world and not something that's really abstract or like hell or Satan or like just some kind of gory, horrible like thing. It seems like this is probably just about how bad the world is, which is fair enough.
Yeah, because there is I think it's probably the first and I think it's maybe the only single on the album. It's called Null, which I was looking at the lyrics for it. Actually, like the way some of the gore is described, it actually could be like a Cannibal Corpse sort of song, but it's done in a way to make it sound like it's more about the sort of feeling of depression. You could get it in like a kind of relatable way. So they actually did pretty well with that. I'll give them credit. credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, you get that sense from even the album cover, which is designed by, I can never remember his name, but it's like Elrine Cantor. He does a lot of, it's very like...
Yeah, he did Testament's latest album as well.
Very realistic kind of like oil painting style. He's done a lot like of metal bands, more than you probably think, but he's got a very recognisable art style. He's done the album cover to it, and it's like humans, they seem to be like melting or something, from what I can remember. So it does kind of suggest that it is about the kind of perils of society rather than your usual Satan black metal nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, again, because I've had not so much time to listen to this, I've maybe only listened to it all once, like in its entirety, but I do really like it. It kind of reminds me of the kind of more kind of intricate black metal bands like Skamash and Miss Thrumming. Again, bloody names. It's like black metal, but it's atmospheric and it adds more than just the kind of really cold, grim kind of underground black metal. Like from the 90s, it's like that, like you say, the kind of taking the death metal low end, kind of really raw, aggressive growls and just putting on to that. I would need to go back and listen to this again, but when I did listen to it, I thought it sounded really heavy for a start, also super dark, and it creates like a really grim, kind of oppressive mood and power to it, which is quite hard to find nowadays, like particularly in black metal for me. It never sounds quite so dark and like, low end. Like black metal is always missing a kind of low end sound to it. That's what even like bands like the Die Artist Murder are really good at the kind of low end. They're a death metal band, but that kind of thing is what I really like with that kind of heavy like side of metal. So them putting that in this just kind of stands out to me a wee bit. What's your highlights on this album? Because I know you've listened to it a bit more than I have.
Yeah, I've given it a few listens now, and I think it is one of those albums that when you listen to it the first time, you will enjoy it, but I think with like multiple listens, you start like finding stuff that you're like, oh, that's really cool. Like I've noticed how like to sort of like on the first track, which is like an 11-minute song, well, they're able to keep that sort of that sort of behemoth kind of blackened sound going. They're able to work in like sort of more melodic riffs towards the end to kind of change it up a bit while keeping like the sort of blast beats going in the background for like a kind of unique sound. First track is the best one, I think, because again, I think this band is probably best at doing the actual longer tracks because there's 3 that go sort of around the 10-minute or over the 10-minute mark. But the first one's just brilliant. I think even starts off kind of like Behemoth because it sounds very sort of blow your trumpet, Gabriel, that kind of slow droning guitar.
Very epic and
before it just sounded
grand. I think, like I was kind of saying, with the atmosphere and stuff, it seems like if they've got a long song, they can kind of do more with it. They can go, you can take, you can go in different directions as opposed to if it's just like a, 4 or 5 minute song, they kind of can just do the one thing and not really do much with it. Like Behemoth kind of do that as well, although they kind of perfected the shorter songs that fit and everything in it. But I suppose they're only on their second album, so they could go anywhere from here, really.
I just realised I probably should have mentioned the name of the first track, which is To Ain. I just said it was the opening track.
That's fine.
Yeah, it does keep up like quite a heavy atmosphere, and even like I said, the lyrics as well. It kind of it's like they're questioning what it means to be human in like the kind of shitty world that we're kind of living in just now. Yeah. So, and then I think this is probably about 6 or 7 minutes into the song. It kind of stops, and then there's like this weirdly melodic section, like it's really soft guitar tones. It almost feels like a breath of fresh air, like after the sort of intense, like first sort of 6 minutes or so, and then it jumps sort of back to the sort of heavier stuff, like which would probably get a wall of death in real life. So I'm kind of hoping for that when that we eventually get back to normal.
Yeah, like that's what I like about bands that are kind of like this, that take kind of cues from Behemoth, is that they don't just go heavy all the time. Like they'll kind of get a bit softer every now and then. They'll change their pace. They'll get faster, they'll get slower, they'll do something that doesn't just make it sound like it's just constant blast beats in your ears to the point where you just kind of get immune to it and you kind of just switch off. But I will go back to this at some point when it doesn't feel like I need quite so heavy, because at the moment it feels like things that are this heavy just are not gelling with my brain. Get a bit too much of that in the outside world.
If you're going to check out this album, the song I'd probably recommend is the song Urge, which is like the shortest track in the album. It's just under 5 minutes. Yeah. It's essentially just major, just fire and fury all the way through it, and just pretty much just pure death metal all the time. So if you like it, then you're definitely going to like the rest of the album as well.
Yeah, and I'll definitely give it another shot. It's just like, obviously, at the moment, I've just had an album come out at the end of last month that's going to be hard for me not to listen to for the rest of the year. And it's basically the last album we'll be covering this month, and you already know what it is.
Yeah.
And it might create some interesting discussion because it is the second album from Southampton's Creeper, which is called Sex, Death and the Infinite Void. Right. So, this band initially were a kind of goth punk band, with the last album they had, Eternity in Your Arms. They were like, kind of AFI meets My Chemical Romance, kind of meets Meatloaf, I suppose. But we'll get to that later. Yeah, I've always liked this band, for at least a few years, probably since the EPs that they released. I've seen them a few times. So, they got to the end of the Eternity in Your Arms cycle, and they, like, quote unquote split up on stage at the end of the album cycle. Ed Q, loads of teenage girls getting all, my life has ended. But funnily enough, they hadn't split up because they really like people like David Bowie and just really theatrical stuff, reinventing themselves, blah blah blah. So basically, they've came back and they've completely changed what they sound like, and if you liked what they did before, you might like this, you might not. I don't know if you'd ever listened to this band before. I was basically saying I would do this, but yeah, they went very different, and this album is that I've got so many notes written down just because of how different each song on this pretty much feels. So, like, I need to give some context to this album first, just because of how it was made and how important that is to the kind of feel of this album. So, basically, after the kind of split up of the band, one of the members, the guitarist in particular, but they've all kind of been through a lot of stuff, but the guitarist in particular ended up getting sectioned and things like that. So yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's quite depressing, but if anybody wants to listen to more about it, they've done like a podcast series that kind of goes into how the album was made and all the stuff they were going through, but it's quite heavy stuff, so like only go in if you really want to know, basically they ended up writing this album kind of on separate continents because, again, their guitarist ended up in hospital for months over in the UK, whereas Will, who is one of the main songwriters, was in Los Angeles and was writing it over there kind of separately from the guitarist who is his co-partner. So already you have an album that's really oppressive before you even get to how it sounds. It's basically like a British album that has been made in America that has American influences all over it. It's like Bowie going to America or something like that. We'll get into it. Okay, it's probably already obvious that I really, 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 really like this album, and I already know that Ross wasn't keen on it because he didn't finish the full album.
I did try.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. It's quite a daunting listen, especially if you're not actually like a fan of the band already, and knowing that you like the kind of heavier side of things. Getting into like particularly where you drop off in this album, it makes sense. But basically, you start off with a kind of My Chemical Romance type thing, kind of continuing on from where they were before with Be My End, which is a massive song. I don't know whether you liked that one. I don't know if you even remember. You probably just blanked this whole album from your brain, at least, or tried to.
Yeah, I did try. I was playing the PS4 when I was listening to it, and I just
fair.
picked up and I was like, I'm just going to try a different one because I'm not going to enjoy this.
Yeah, fair.
Nothing against the album, just not for me. That's all.
So it'll probably just be me talking for like at least 10 minutes. So like Be My End is like My Chemical Romance, just absolutely huge sounding chorus, like, like tugging on your like t-shirt, like gothy punk song that the world has been missing basically since My Chemical Romance split up. But yeah, that's kind of what they were doing before, so kind of it's good that they didn't just stick with that, but they are really, really good at doing it. You have, up next was Born Cold, which was actually the first single that they released, which immediately kind of said that this album was going to be very different from the first one. It kind of has that kind of Brit rock, like David Bowie, pulp, very kind of almost arty kind of rock, very strange, like, 70s, 80s kind of style to it that is quite rare to hear now, especially for a young band. When they first released it, I wasn't initially sure. I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what they're doing. The production was kind of, again, that kind of more raw, like they're going for kind of 70s feel to it, so it kind of sounds a bit, not high, like modern. It sounds pretty retro. It's kind of like, I don't really know. It's got a good chorus, but I'm not sure about it. I don't know where they're going. But thankfully, when they released other singles and when they released the album, it made a lot more sense. Obviously, the full album goes through like a kind of story. It has a story to it. Kind of, again, total Bowie influence. It's like an alien comes from another planet, falls in love with a girl, and then they have like a doomed lover type thing. So yeah, that's where that comes from. Going into Bowie again, kind of common theme here, but Cyanide is another single that they released, and again, I wasn't sure about this. I'm not the biggest fan of Bowie. I'm also not the biggest fan of Oasis or Pulp or any of those kind of bands, but people do it really well. Or at least they do it really well on this album. It's that kind of, like, Oasis. When you hear an Oasis song with a piano in it, you're like, it's got like 3 or 4 chords and it kind of is really mid-tempo and it has like, it has a certain type of chorus. That's basically what this song is. It's influenced by Bowie, of course. So it's another one where I was like, I don't dig this really, but once again, in the context of the album, it makes sense, and at least I didn't have that problem with the next song, Annabelle, which is instantly one of my favourite songs of the year. Like, even when they released this as a single, it was just massive. That chorus, so many bands would kill to write a chorus like that. I don't know if you remember it, but it has these massive like all the way right up until it, and I can't wait to see this live. It's just going to be... I mean, actually, I did see it live, but that was supporting Baby Metal, and that didn't make any sense. But yeah, that was an odd one. When I hear this live at a headline show, whenever that'll be, is going to be incredible. Just... I'm finding it hard to even describe how good I find it. I know that I think it's the next song that you dropped out of the album, Paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah, or was it Poison Heart? And I never remember.
That was Paradise, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where the album kind of goes. For the next 2 songs, it goes more kind of going away from the British kind of side of things into the kind of Americana, country, gothy, gloomy kind of thing. It sounds like a little bit of like Johnny Cash mixed with like the kind of baritone Pete Steele from Type O Negative. Actually kind of reminds me a lot of the Pixies' album from last year, which gothy, Americana, very chilled out. It sounds like driving like down an American highway at night, like on Route 66 or something, or like a seedy part of like Los Angeles, which makes total sense considering that's where the album was actually recorded. It also has a saxophone, so again, that makes me like a song, basically. It's another kind of, this type of music isn't something that I would normally go to, but it just works. And you go on this journey with the album, and it's just great. You just get engrossed in it. Poisoned Heart is, if you'd have continued on the album, you definitely would have pulled out here because it's basically a country song.
Oh god.
Yeah, like again, Cash or even Tom Waits, they're really good at doing it. I don't know how they can just like basically approach any kind of genre and be like, yeah, we're going to do it. It doesn't matter if it works or not. We're just going to try it. They've actually tried doing country before on the last album, but I actually think this one is better because it sounds more authentic, sounds more mature, and they use the 2 vocalists they've got, Will as in the main vocalist, and they use the backing vocalist Hannah, and they kind of play off of one another. It's quite subtle, but I like it. It's good. By this point, I'm like totally pretty much sold on the album. It doesn't matter what they throw out, which is probably, it would be a good thing for you because the next song is Thorns of Love, which...
Oh, I remember that one.
Yes, because I made you listen to it.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, you have to listen to this song because oh my god. I just want to know what you thought of this because wow.
Just cheese essentially.
Yeah, right.
The female vocals weren't bad. I remember enjoying that.
You picked cheesiest part of the song to really like. So basically, this is like a Steinman wet dream. It is like Meatloaf. It is Meatloaf. If you played this to somebody and did a Meatloaf impression over this song, you could convince anybody that this was actually a Meatloaf song and it was recorded in bloody 1979 or whatever. They don't make music like this anymore. Most people, they can see why. Like, most people are like, oh, I hate that. That's why, but I love it. I love it.
Let's take it back to your Bon Jovi days.
Exactly. Like, this is it, right? I love like cheesy power metal. Power metal? No. Power ballads. How can you not like it? It's yeah, I'm speechless. But basically,
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah, it's Meatloaf like doo-wop, kind of really camp, Rocky Horror type music, kind of mixed with like Queen, like your fist in the air. It's honestly like if you liked this kind of Meatloaf stuff back in the day, just listen to this because it's incredible. Like that chorus, like you know when you hear a chorus and your heart just like explodes. You probably get it with some like weird power metal band or whatever, but like, oh my god, even just like, especially knowing what this band has been through, like being able to make a song like this, and then Ian's guitar, like the guitar solo comes in and it's like the biggest thing that you've ever heard. Like Queen literally would write a guitar, like Brian May would write a solo like that, and it would be people would worship at his feet. It's just, like you say, the female vocals are a prominent feature on this album. Like, it's probably the one thing that I have a slight issue with, just because it's like, it's spoken word sections. I believe it's the female vocals from Sisters of Mercy. I'm not 100% sure though. It's very theatre, which, you know, you'll like or you'll not like. They've had parts of this before, but it's very, very cheesy. It's basically helping narrate the story, like in the way that Meatloaf does. If you can get on board with Meatloaf doing it, you'll be fine with it here, but it's the fact that it's on, 4 or 5 tracks. For me, it's not really quite necessary. The album describes the story enough on its own. It doesn't really detract from the album that much, but I can see why it would put people off. Saying that though, the rest of the album is still excellent. Not so much singles. It's kind of, what's the word? B-side kind of material. So you've got 4 Years Ago, which is again another kind of Americana, very slow, gloomy American Highway type thing again. It's got this really good like interplay between the vocals again. It's probably the best use of dual vocals that I've heard in ages, because his vocals, it's like very low. Again, almost like a typo negative, very gothic. And then hers is really like higher pitched and soft, and they just play off each other really well. It's one of the songs that it's a grower, but a lot of this album kind of is. I think the next song, Napalm Girls, kind of brings back that My Chemical Romance type thing from earlier, but it's a bit darker because the album, the story is getting a bit dark. It's getting a bit like, oh, the lovers are somebody's going to die, basically. It's a Romeo and Juliet type situation, but it's got like, so My Chemical Romance, and then into Springsteen, into kind of The Cure, kind of 80s reverberated guitars, into like The Killers. But like, it works. I don't know how they do it, but it works. I don't like The Killers, and I like Springsteen, I like My Chemical Romance, but The Killers are but yeah, somehow they make it work. Again, one of the best songs on the album. I think the penultimate song is Black Moon, and it's probably my least favourite song on the album, at least initially. Another kind of slower song, it's less memorable, maybe just doesn't have quite as big a hook. But then he starts like wailing over the chorus again, and you're like, you can just make somebody going like, sound like really catchy. They're just an amazing band. It just leads really well into the last song, which is super emotional because it kind of pulls itself out of the story a little bit, and it goes into the surroundings of the band, as in what's been happening with everything, really. It's called All My Friends, and it's kind of dedicated to Ian, the guitarist, so it's just really powerful. It's like, I don't know how they're going to play this one live, because you hear him when he's singing it, and you know that way where you can hear somebody's voice cracking?
Yeah.
That, you can literally physically hear it cracking. Just in the recording alone, like just sitting on the piano basically on his own, singing about how he feels like he's messed up and like all his friends are hurting about this thing that's just basically just how Yeah, it's going to be. They'll probably will play it live as well because it's a single. I'm pretty sure it's the last song they released on the album. Yeah, it's a really powerful end to an album that's it's so good. Like, I'm just like a sucker for this, but also because I'm trying not to get like too personal about it, but I've really been struggling to enjoy music the same this year just because of what's been happening. I think you've been a wee bit the same, but it's really hard to listen to anything that's too, like when we're talking about the black metal albums and stuff, it's just nothing's really resonating with me. But when I put this one on, it was like, music is great. I love music. Which, been kind of missing that. This is basically like a love letter to music. It doesn't matter what kind of music you're into, you'll probably find something that you can at least find the influences from. If not like, you I think when you were describing Thorns of Love, I can't remember who you described it as similar as being, but it was somebody completely different from what I had taken off, like Meatloaf. But I have seen comparisons to like Roy Orbison and things like that. Like I don't listen to that, but it's really, really cool how a band can just, anybody can find an influence on it. Doesn't matter what you like. That's usually a sign of a good band to me. They have done something really special, and it's like an album that really means a lot to me. So it's going to be really difficult for another album to top that this year. But here's hoping that the end of the year is a bit better.
Still got a few months to go.
Yeah, not just musically, but just also generally. But this has been a strange month because, like I say, we've had to go back and, go back to the start of the year. We'll probably have to do that again next month because it's a bit sparse at the moment. Bands are struggling. But yeah, we will definitely be able to find at least a few albums to talk about, and we'll probably go back to some of the ones that we've missed from early in the year because we have missed some.
Still got a couple of big ones with Avatar and Biffy at least.
Yeah. I was going to mention earlier that Phoxjaw was like filling in the Biffy-sized hole that was, waiting until the album comes out, but we'll have more to say on that next month. But yeah, if anybody's actually listened to this, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you there.